When I try and explain Second Life to people in the real life, which is very difficult, and you lose friends sometimes when you start talking about Second Life too much. My mum and dad, what are you doing? Until you tell them, well, I make money doing it. And they're like, oh, okay, pay my rent with this, mum. Then they're all proud of you, I am Loz Hyde, owner of Meshworks, and you're listening to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. Oh my God, that could be a real tongue twister. You don't want to say that more than once.
Dude, I say it every week.
Oh, really? If you said every week 4 times, that would be worse, I think. But yeah, Joe Yardley, Joe Yardley, Joe Yardley. Well, that is difficult to say.
Hello there and welcome to the Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley. My name is Drax de Dupre. I'm here in our old dusty attic studio in Second Life's 1920s Berlin sim with the one and only Joe Yardley. Hi, Joe.
Hello, how do you do?
And in the station ID, we gave it away. The next Drax Files video will be about Loz Hyde, a special effects guy in Hollywood, worked on big movies like Guardians of the Galaxy with Drax the Destroyer, mind you.
I used to do special effects in real life.
What did you not do? You were a journalist?
I've done only the cool jobs.
And now, what are you doing now?
Talking to hippies. Right, Drax?
You completely caught me off guard mid-sentence. I just wanted to say that Loz Hyde, who did the station ID this week, is going to be on the next video, and that will be out in early October. And he is also a special effects guy, and he will talk about why Second Life is more exciting than Guardians of the Galaxy. Back to the show today. We have a full show, as always. We have a big feature with Brian Carter, assistant professor at the University of Arizona in the Africana Studies program. He teaches African American literature, as well as digital humanity courses. And most importantly, he's the maker behind Virtual Harlem. He brought the Harlem Renaissance, so to speak, the interbellum period. We'll learn a lot about that later in the program. Again, a lot of VR history. And by the way, our thumbnail today for the show, it features the painting Black Belt by Archibald John Motley. I think it's from 1934. We'll link to it later. Also, we have Second Life resident made music. Yep, not everyone in Second Life is a music hack like me. We have Oblay on the show later. He financed the production of his newest album, all with in-world tips from virtual shows. Now that's pretty awesome. Joe, what have you been up to? Nothing?
I've been trying to figure out what's going on with this net neutrality thing, because everyone's talking about everything, and as usual, I have no idea what's going on.
Well, you're in Europe. You're in the land, where people actually have sort of a sensible approach to these things. But as you know, I'm on the. We link to a piece by John Oliver, I think, which explains it. Really, I mean, leave it to the comedians to explain these things. Net neutrality, essentially, here in the U.S. is the absence of it would be a 2-tier road where some content, depending on how much you can pay, will be delivered faster than other content on the internet. So the democracy of content is really, really threatened here. The democracy of content delivery, I should say. And it's really about urging Congress to reclassify the internet as a common carrier, the mobile access to content as a common carrier.
It means that they're going to charge you more for certain kinds of content instead of certain types of internet.
There's a road with cobblestone, just like in 1920s Berlin. And then there's a super fast highway. And if you have the dough to pay for the highway, as a content provider, you can get that, you can take that road. So
you're not paying for the road, you're paying for the byways. If you've got no money, you're on the cobble road and you're just going slow.
The status right now in the US is such, and maybe I can illustrate it with this example. There are a bunch of monopolies that control the pipes where content comes into your home. And right now I'm paying for Comcast internet, I'm paying almost $90 a month. In Europe, that would be 30 euros or less for the equivalence in speed. The issue here is that even very, very big content providers like Netflix, they're being holed up, basically. Their service is being slowed down, and then Comcast goes to them and goes like, hey, Netflix, maybe your viewers will enjoy uninterrupted, nice streaming of your videos. Huh? How about giving me $2 million in cash, and I can make sure that happens.
So it's a little bit like, three guys with too much grease in their hair walking into your shop and saying, hey, it would be a shame if something happened to your shop.
Be a shame if something would happen to your lag-free Second Life experience. Oh, wait a minute. I never had a lag-free Second Life experience, so go right ahead. A couple of housekeeping notes, and we're going to get to the body of the show. You can get in touch with us via the show's avatar, Drax Files. He's always online, in world, depending on net neutrality. On Skype, you can leave us a voicemail anytime under Drax Files as well. And the email where you should preferably send us MP3 audio commentary, if you like, or music that we shall bring to our massive audience is radio@draxfiles.com. You can support this show by either becoming a sponsor with your own banner or visiting the sponsors. Now, let me say that again. Frequent our sponsors. Give your business to them. Go in World Shop, go to Marketplace, and buy their awesome stuff. And tell them Frau Joe sent you from the Drax Files Radio Hour. Now, the banners are on the right of the blog. Ping us if you like to advertise. Of course, you can also take out a voluntary subscription. Also, subscribe to the show on Stitcher and iTunes. And maybe even rate or review us there. Now, this was a slow news week, but we have a few items before we go to the feature section. I just wanted to briefly mention that I think Microsoft is very near a deal to buy Minecraft. Minecraft is similar to Second Life in the sense that it enables user creation and manipulating the world and kind of owning the world and becoming creative. So maybe this is a validation again of a virtual world concept.
It seems that we no longer have to be embarrassed and, start acting and behaving like nerds and geeks because we're involved with virtual reality. It's gone mainstream.
Does that mean Second Life is up for sale soon?
If someone involved with a big company is also knows Second Life for what it is and knows that it has a huge potential, then the chances are there. And who knows, at Linden Lab, they may be actually looking around and seeing, waiting for something like that to happen. Because, if I had a few billion, I would probably give it a go because I think that Second Life may have another chance at being big when virtual reality goes even bigger. And you realize that Second Life, regardless of what your opinion on it, is still the biggest online sandbox virtual reality thing there is. I might give it a go. Well,
the rumor that Second Life is up for sale by any number of large entities has been, going back and forth for years now. I remember, they're getting ready to be publicly traded, and but who knows? With Second Life 2.0, I think a buyer who would buy Linden Lab and the combined expertise of people who work there and who handle basically the administration of a extremely complex world with its own economy. Just think about the microtransactions that happen every day. That's a level of expertise in just sort of day-to-day operations.
If they wait another year or two, we're going to have Second Life 2, which is either much better or a disaster. And virtuality is going to probably have gone mainstream by then. Oculus Rift is probably for sale. And then it will be a much more tempting and interesting thing to try and buy Second Life.
Verdict is out on the Oculus. As you know, the obsession or the alleged obsession with the Oculus on my part has caused a rift between me and a few friends.
I just got a little news on the site.
What? This just in? Are you saying this just in?
Yeah, it's not that exciting, but yes, just happened to find it. Keanu Reeves is making another virtual reality project, not The Matrix, but a television series. So that's going to be interesting. It's going to be massive, and it's going to be made with blockbuster director Roland Emmerich.
Oh, Roland Emmerich, who was once told at the Munich Film School when he graduated, his professor famously said, Roland, the stuff that you're doing is corny garbage. Go to Hollywood because they like it over there. And Roland said, okay, das mache ich doch mal. And he did. And now he's just the #1 director of disaster movies.
You know, that's what my teacher taught me when I was in film academy.
What did he say? Go with Roland and move in with him and make movies and marry him?
No. I told him that I preferred a Steven Spielberg movie to a Fellini movie.
Oh,
and
boy.
I got into a fight with my teacher, which was fun.
That is hilarious. I wanted to add with the whole Minecraft thing that you can play Minecraft in Second Life. There is on Marketplace a Minecraft HUD. Check it out. It's hilarious. You dress up Second Life and it looks like Minecraft, and it has some of the functionality.
Also the same high level of amazing graphics.
Yeah, it almost makes Second Life look like it's 2005 all over again. Now, moving on to the next news item, Google Tracker. I picked this up from TechCrunch. Google unveils the Cartographer. It's an indoor mapping backpack, and as far as I can see, it puts you can put a machine on your backpack, and you walk around, and then it maps your surroundings in 3D.
Right. So what some companies are working on, and to enable you to do with just a mobile phone, they've developed into a massive heavy backpack.
Good point. Good point.
Sorry.
It's old school. I mean, some people still want to carry heavy backpacks up a mountain. And
can you imagine something for the virtual Facebook world, or for Second Life 2, or for whatever is happening in, let's say, 5 years? Then a new user joins Second Life, and instead of being thrown at the most horrendous beginner's island, they have to first push a button on their mobile phone, and they start their virtual life in their own apartment in virtual reality.
New user joins Second Life. That sounds like a headline for The Onion. Speaking of satire, Virtually News. Mona Eberhardt blogged about Virtually News. It's a new SL satire show, and they're taping it live. It's with Ava Jean Westland, who is a real-life actress in New York City. And down the line, I'm actually going to do an episode about the Avatar Repertory Theater, and she's part of that. So I want to bring the attention of folks to this new satire show, Virtually News. I wish them the very, very best, because we need more SL content. We need more quality SL content to mix with the other gaming content out there on YouTube. Along those lines, Joe, I started a new Twitch channel for Escapades Island, and I know I live in 1920s Berlin in the attic, but I also live on Escapades Island, and Escapades Island had a 4th anniversary last weekend, and I just did some live streaming on Twitch.
It's a fantastic place.
It was so much fun, though, to put this out on Twitch. And again, I want to throw this out to the listener. If you have, a Twitch account, just, stream maybe your everyday life on whatever island you live, or maybe your work in SL when you're a builder or something like that.
Yeah, and also on YouTube, because, remember, a video you make showing Second Life, showing a part of Second Life that people don't know, might be the reason that someone thinks, hang on, Second Life is not all about the hanky-panky.
Not only do we need to represent, we also need to archive. I think it also has archival purposes.
Oh, tell me about it. I think I've got about 4 screenshots of the very first version of 1920s Berlin. And they were all made in the dark, because I didn't know how to turn on the sun.
I'm sure there's much more happening out there that we didn't get to. Please send us scoops or comment on the show, what we should keep an eye on. But now it's time to go to the feature interview with Brian Carter. Brian is an assistant professor at the University of Arizona in the Africana Studies program. He teaches African American literature of the early 20th century, as well as digital humanity courses. He's also visiting professor at the University of Paris at the Sorbonne. And most importantly, he's the maker of Virtual Harlem. As you will hear, Brian is also, like last week's guest Jackie Mori, in many ways a pioneer in the virtual reality space. The Virtual Harlem project goes way back to 1998. And of course, he is an old bee in Second Life as well. He started in Second Life in early 2005. In this interview, we talk also a lot about education. We talk a lot about identity in Second Life. Enjoy. Here is Professor Carter.
I came on pretty early when Pathfinder was still around, and they still had a very, very strong and emerging educational community. They had Edu Island, and they set us all up with locations there. I shared a space with some friends at Northern Illinois University for a little while. I had a little spaceship above their island and taught some classes there. And then I was able to get some funding to purchase at one point up to 3 islands in Second Life with some grant funds from an organization in New York, the Black Programming Consortia, as well as, in fact, they funded me twice, as well as the government of Norway, believe it or not, part of a collaboration with a university in Sweden, a university in Norway, and my university, University of Central Missouri, where we developed a grant for lifelong learning, and we were the recipients of a portion of that. So that, really did some interesting things with us funding some of the development and maintenance costs.
I'll get later to the, what are the reasons why you went to OpenSim and other places. We talk about it a lot, sort of an exodus of educators. But now the Virtual Harlem project. So explain this. How did it come about?
Well, that project came about as part of my PhD studies at the University of Missouri, Columbia. There was a call for faculty members and advanced graduate students to submit proposals using a brand new technology called virtual reality. This was back in 1996-97. Mine and 2 other faculty members' projects were picked up to be developed by an organization called the Advanced Technology Center at the University of Missouri. And so it was through this center that the very first Virtual Harlem project was developed in full virtual reality using huge silicon graphics computers, and there was a team of graphic artists and computer programmers, as well as even a maintenance guy to set this up in a cave-like environment. This environment was shared with a lot of universities around the world, literally, as one of the very early sort of immersive, contextual environments that was created for the humanities.
And then you witnessed through the advent of Second Life that these tools are more democratized, and now you could basically build it yourself. I mean, not the cave part, but at least in the world, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, with the decrease in funding and the increase in those kinds of technologies, you can do some really interesting things, for those that have that kind of skill. I don't personally.
And in Virtual Harlem now, as it was in Second Life and now in OpenSim, what do I see? Just describe it. We're on the radio. When I go in there, is there a role play component to it? Am I more a spectator or?
Well, there was some of that, and it's been through a lot of iterations. While it was on Second Life, at one point there was a fairly active role play component. Then it emerged, or I guess evolved, into a sort of a collaborative educational environment where there were, real artists practicing in the real world. A very good friend of mine, India Vehar, who actually is an artist in the islands of the Carolinas, doing Gullah artwork, did exhibits and presentations there. Had an artist from Puerto Rico that taught classes there. My classes were taught there exclusively, so students were physically dispersed a lot of different places. There were history classes. I mean, so it took on a very vibrant, interesting educational component for a while. Then we, had an influx of entertainers, whether they be DJs or live entertainers streaming from their studios at home or wherever, and, of course, performing through their avatars. So we had that going on in some of the cabarets, parties, all kinds of things. And then that community began to dwindle a bit, of course, with the advent of sort of Linden decreasing their support of educational entities. That caused a lot of that exodus that many of us experienced.
You speak about it in the past tense, but it's my understanding that in OpenSim it's alive and well.
Well, yes, Virtual Harlem is alive and well in OpenSim right now. It has been recreated at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. They're hosting it now, so it's wide open for those to come visit. I am now that it's in a very stable environment, we're doing a couple of things. We're attracting, or I've been approaching other educators to begin begin doing projects there. I've talked with a number of colleagues that we'll be announcing here very soon that are going to be either teaching classes there or encouraging their students to do projects there that will result in maybe publications, presentations, those kinds of things. So we're really looking at first building that educational component. When you think about the educational entity or component that Linden began to sort of dwindle their support for, that's only one of, I think, some of the reasons why many educators sort of left and explored other platforms. There are various issues, not just that. There's the graphics issue. There's some of the performance issues that we sometimes just deal with because it's really kind of the best thing going in some respects because of that community. But I think when you look at some of the other platforms that, and I applaud those that have stayed in Second Life and are, taking advantage of some of the newer things that they're incorporating into their software. But those of us that have moved on are looking at maybe higher resolutions and maybe connections to other platforms that are maybe more open to those connections as opposed to some of the closed networking that is kind of within the Linden Lab version.
If you haven't been in Second Life for the last 6 months or so, you will be absolutely amazed what the stability is and the fidelity of the visuals. For better or worse, I don't see any other viable competitor in the metaverse space.
Well, I can see your point, and that's what took me so long to leave Second Life. The cost was one thing, but it was also because, I had to, continue questioning what was I moving to. There really is not as big a community, as we all know, in OpenSim as there is in Second Life, and it took it was a very hard decision to make that. But when I thought about, that evolution of Harlem, OpenSim is just one of those steps, I think. Looking at the open source, community and maybe shifting some of the focus of Harlem from a purely museum gathering role-playing environment, which it can be, but also one that is experimental and edgy and looking at, various ways to connect different entities, which is really what Harlem was all about during that time period. So it's shifting the metaphorical focus of it in some respect, but I think it's going to attract some very innovative folks. But then it's moving on to Unity, which I think is one of the really emerging platforms that some educators are definitely gravitating towards because of the graphic quality, as well as because of the open nature of the file format, which may then encourage a new set of developers that can see that as a stepping stone to the gaming industry, which I think is a really important sort of connection to make as well.
I understand the attraction of Unity for many, many reasons, but the fact of the matter really is, and a lot of people don't know it because the media, and that drives me nuts, the media keeps dragging out these old snapshots and all this stuff. Linden Lab have added all the features resolution-wise that Unity has. Of course, Unity has an advantage if I want to have the singular experience and I want to deploy it. But oh man, it would be so rich if you guys come back.
But you're missing the point. It's not a matter of resolution. It's not a matter of performance. It's not even a matter of necessarily the largest, most vibrant community. It's more so a matter of maybe in some way emulating that vibe that I'm trying to capture. That was a part of Harlem of the 1920s in many respects. It was dangerous in some respects. It was edgy. It was carefree. It was in some cases, kind of out there that folks didn't necessarily understand.
But then when you're talking about this in the digital context, then are you talking about control over creating these environments? So then you're essentially talking about game elements that you can program into an experience.
Well, I'm not looking at binaries. I'm not saying it has to be one thing or another. It may include some gaming elements, but it also should be an open environment where anything can happen, that can be multimodal, that can, connect in some ways to the real world. And I think that when you begin to explore all of that, sometimes, and it's great to look at, how a legacy platform can maybe begin to incorporate some of those things, but, you're still comfortable within that legacy that I think that is different from, the direction that I think Harlem can really, allow people to begin to explore imagination very differently, perhaps.
I want examples. I think I know what you're saying, but I was just at the virtual reality conference in Silicon Valley, and people make amazing things. And there's this guy, they have all sorts of goggles with cell phones in it. They have, my son tried the tactical haptics thing where you touch it and you get the tactical feedback. But in terms of experiences, I have not seen anything that is remotely interesting. I've seen the same old, look here, you can have a virtual business meeting. There is a lack of to be honest, there's a lack of imagination in terms of experiences. And everybody is so sort of gung-ho about these devices. And I would say, I want to go into virtual Harlem with these devices. I'm not interested in the 10,000th shooter singular experience. I want to be there and have a communal experience.
Right, and you can, and in many ways you can do that. If there is an eventual sort of re-presence in Second Life, it's not going to then be devoid of those different presences, presence in other locations, to include platforms like Jibe or Unity or perhaps a different gaming engine where some sort of exploration can take place as far as the limits and where a new community might be reached that wasn't reached in those previous locales. So there's where I think it's not leaving the legacy behind. I don't want to say that. I think the legacy is important, but I also think that there's this future vision that is also exciting, and that's what Harlem was during that time. It was exciting, and that's where I would see it exciting in a legacy format, but not edgy kind of exciting. You see what I mean?
I think I understand, but I would still argue that you could infuse that edginess. You're talking about a legacy platform, but it's up to us to infuse that platform with as much edginess as we want.
But it's still the platform, right? Why only contain yourself to a particular place?
Well, I agree with you 100%. I dream of the metaverse where everything is together. Just like real life, I either take my bike over there or I take a plane over there, and I am in a different place. I'm in a different culture. I'm immersed in it. That would be ideal. But in terms of what you can do, I don't see a lot of limitations. I see some limitations in terms of automating characters right now. When I'm working on a project now where there's some limits, and there may be better in Unity or other platforms. That is entirely possible, but they're minuscule, I think.
But listen to what you just said. You just said that you wanted this to exist in an environment that, or you wish that there was a metaverse where all these worlds could be recreated. Well, if you want that, then that means there has to be multiple instances of the same world in these multiple locations. And so you can imagine that if maybe Harlem were one of those locations that was sort of, all over the place, and then somebody, smart, way smarter than me, may write the code that will allow all of these to sort of layer right on top of one another, and people can exist in any or all of them. That's exactly what that most recent movie with Halle Berry and what's his name? That's exactly what Cloud Atlas is all about. So it's an amazing film. And so, when I think about that film, it's not going to mimic exactly the book, but for those that haven't read the book, it really captures a different kind of, sort of existence. Now imagine, Harlem being maybe a sort of a model of that in some respects in the real world. So imagine existing, some folks that have the gear to exist there, but they can then communicate with a Harlem version of Minecraft, or they could then, maybe integrate with maybe some version of Harlem on SL or OpenSim or Unity or Curio or whatever the case might be. So there is where you have, folks just, intermingling with one another, exactly the kind of metaverse that you described.
Virtual Harlem, and I didn't mention this in the beginning, is a certain era. What's special about it?
It's the period that was once referred to as the New Negro period. The Harlem Renaissance, later on, we became to recognize it as. The period just after World War I, after the African American troops that were not allowed to fight under the French flag, under the American flag, fought for the French, and came known to be the Hell Fighters. So they helped not only win the war, but they also helped usher jazz into Europe during that time. And of course, we as a young country, mimicking the Europeans in many respects at that time, we began to love jazz as well. And so here you have this sort of interesting relationship. So this is a period of the 1920s and the very, very early 1930s when jazz was hot, when art was attractive, when there were connections between black publishers and white publishers and black writers and artists that were basically traveling all over the world because the Negro was in vogue during that time.
Just dreaming again back to the very far future. Now I can see myself. Let's say I'm putting my goggles on and I'm going into a jazz club, and there is a computer-generated non-player character band, and I just go up and jam with them.
Exactly.
Jesus Christ, that will be pretty darn cool.
Yeah, that's some of the goals, and in any location to really begin to bring this environment to life in a number of ways, especially with the use of motion capture and some of the other interesting ways to get more realistic movements onto these avatars, as well as to maybe get people to eventually embody those avatars in some way because of the gestures and the movements that will be very, very much attached to the real person.
So I could then, in your vision, I could play myself as a visitor, let's say. Let's stay with this jazz club, but I could also inhabit maybe the role of a famous jazz musician and sort of live his or her life, or a writer of the time.
Exactly, and then having access to information about that person's life and movements and language, or most famous works, or what have you, so that as you maybe began to slip into that role, you can begin to learn more about that person's personality.
I was just wondering, do you encounter in your family, or maybe within the not so enlightened educational community, issues with virtual reality? Do people have issues with virtual reality? Do you encounter opinions such as, this has nothing to do with education? Are there people around you like that sometimes?
Well, sometimes, but I think that's starting to change with the way that VR has been not only popularized in the media, and seen as, in some ways normalized, but also the way that that the military is using it, the way that, first responders are using it, the way that psychologists are beginning to use it. So, I think we in the education field have really helped validate some of the uses of VR that is now being maybe more accepted by the public.
Some people have also very clear thoughts on that games don't belong in a classroom, for instance.
The argument's getting old because there's so many studies that are out there that prove otherwise. So I think that and now people are beginning to really differentiate the difference between a virtual environment and a game. You pointed it out earlier, this sort of control over movements and what you can and can't do, although it appears that those choices are limitless, they're really not. And so I think that there's some uses for that, but there's also some uses for a more open-ended environment that you can then begin to add content, and you can exist and experience it in very different ways through different medium, feel it in any way you want, and maybe view it in any way you want, or even project your presence there in various ways, even if you're walking down the street in the real world.
Joe is always talking about this, put some sort of goggles on or contact lenses and go through real life Berlin today, and then have an overlay of non-player characters and just boom, teleport yourself into the 20s.
Yeah, well, I think it may not, I don't know if it's going to be exactly that elaborate, but I do think that, very soon at least, but I do think that there are going to be these really interesting connections between VR and AR and the real world. So we're already seeing that with so many AR applications that are out there. My students that I took to Paris last fall. I did some augmented reality for a tour company that does tours of Black Paris, and so you can scan a doorway with your mobile and get these overlays that the students sort of projected. Now we're going to be connecting that to virtual Harlem, so you can scan posters inside the environment from your screen and see information augmented on top of your mobile device. I mean, why not begin to merge these two worlds in some very interesting ways? And that's the direction we're moving.
Sometimes we think virtual worlds with the avatar representation, we are so free and we can represent ourselves, and it's so the equality is just so immense as opposed to segregated real life. What is your sense of that? First of all, is it really true, or is it just a pipe dream that liberals like to sort of project? And also, is the involvement of African Americans lacking in internet culture as a whole?
Well, you can't conflate internet culture and virtual environments.
I just did.
Yes, you did. You can't do that because when you're thinking about the various ways that we interact with one another in digital ways, that's different from internet culture.
But it's been pointed out in the media also that it is also not, it's not very sort of equal how people use the internet. There are certain hurdles. One of them is access of high-speed internet. The other one is obviously price, and that impacts communities in different ways.
Well, I think that there are also, sort of compelling studies that look at, just because one doesn't have, say, a computer, doesn't mean that they're still not able to access that data through maybe a smartphone. And maybe that's where, some communities are finding that, through the use of LTE, which is in some cases faster than some broadband in people's homes, that, the consumption as well as the production of digital, resources and information is taking place in different ways for those that may not necessarily have traditional access. And I think that's very exciting as well, to be able to, do a broadcast from your mobile device and put your presence on the web in ways that you used to have to do from your desktop machine at home with, a T1 or whatever the case might be.
Well, again, but let me apologize for stepping on you as you were just about to actually parse what I had just conflated. Let's go into detail. I'm not in academia. I'm just a journalist. Which is terrible.
No. And I think that's important that you even say that, because I think that, there are some journalistic communities that begin to, reinforce some of those stereotypes about access and about, maybe some disparate communities. And not that there isn't that, but I think that there may not necessarily be as fair a perspective on the different ways that some communities are able to really do some amazing things, online, but just not through a $1,200 laptop computer.
It's just also that my friend also said this is just sort of a thought experiment, because her avatar is white and she has been experimenting with that as a fashion designer and entrepreneur. It's just that she says she probably is more successful because she's white, and she would be even more successful if she was male. Her avatar.
Well, I don't know about all the studies that either support or refute that. I'm sure that there are compelling arguments on both sides of that particular argument, because I do know that when I first started in Second Life, many years ago, and even, just before I got out, there still weren't necessarily as many choices for ethnic skins or hair or, that kind of thing that you find in other guises. And so, sometimes that can be rather discouraging for, in a community to even want to get into this environment. Of course, there are those that will pass. My dissertation was partly about that. And so there are those that will pass within these worlds and maybe assume different identities for various reasons. But I do think that, because there's that sort of subtle, rejection of the other within these worlds also, that sometimes there many minority groups may say, well, I'm not going to have to deal with that when I have so many other things that I can, get into technology-wise.
So that's what you found. So that the kind of exclusion within a clique or a group can happen based on on appearance, just like in the real world.
Well, yeah, I do know that many of my students, would typically comment on, where can I find some dreads, or where, why can I find skin that looks like me?
I have awesome dreads in Second Life.
Do you really? I believe it. I know they've made some improvements.
You were talking about your dissertation. I was going to ask you, can you talk about your initial experience? How did you experience your own identity when you came in?
Well, see, that's interesting. I wanted to find or create a presence in this world that looked like me, because I saw, one of the very interesting aspects of virtual worlds is this projection of ourselves into that environment. And I didn't see myself, this is just a personal choice. I didn't see myself as an animal or, some sort of mechanized, creature or whatever the case might be. I wanted to be me, or as close to me as possible. So I looked around for skin and hair and tone and eye color and things that would represent me as accurately as possible. Of course, that's very difficult to do with these layman hands and not being able to be very skilled. So I was reliant upon the community. And early on, that community was not there. It did evolve, I have to admit. So there were many more choices, but in many cases, they were just colorized choices of European skin, basically. And that was a problem too, because then I'd have to manually try to, give myself a wider nose or more African-American features, which, I'm not necessarily that skilled to do that. So that's what I found. And that may have changed just a little bit, but not as quickly as the evolution of other ethnicities within the environment.
What was your dissertation about? About identity and all that in virtual worlds?
It was about passing. Yes, it was about this notion of when the international slave trade was abolished here in America, slave owners took to breeding their own stock, and the children of those stock oftentimes would come out looking like the master sometimes, or the mother, sometimes blonde hair, blue eye. But because of the one drop rule here in America, they were still considered slaves. They became sort of the elite class of African Americans during that time, and definitely after slavery, because they had more opportunities to go to school, to be educated in different ways, sometimes even before slavery was over. So this became this sort of elite class, the educators, the business owners, etc. And so there were many novels written about that notion during the late 1900s and early 20th century. And so that notion of passing was part of my dissertation. If you were, blonde hair and blue eyed, but your mother was black, you were still considered black. So, there were many African Americans who were encouraged in some cases by family members to pass. And in doing so, they would oftentimes have to literally walk away, sneak away, run away from home, leave that physical environment so they would never be recognized. But they would leave behind family, they would leave behind friends and a community, and have to start all over again with no heritage attached to them. And so that then accorded them, because of their look, oftentimes, which was, in some ways rather exotic, because, something was a little bit different. And so they oftentimes had, very interesting opportunities that they would not have been afforded had they stayed within a black community.
How does that apply to a virtual world?
Think about what you just said earlier when you said you feel very comfortable, in whatever guise you're in, which and there have been sort of accounts of some racism going on in Second Life, and so I think that when you begin to explore, if you happen to be African American and maybe a dark or a brown skin African American, considering various things about what it would be like to be another gender, another ethnicity, and see how I would be treated within this environment, whether it's for research or whether it's for some other reason. You can't speculate on people's motivations, but when you think about representing yourself differently and seeing that avatars treat you differently versus if you were to then represent yourself in another way and going to that same location and seeing how you'd be treated, then in some cases you may, if you just want to hang out in this world and don't want to be bothered, why not put on your white skin? If that's the community that you happen to feel comfortable, so there are various reasons why people think about doing things like that, exploring the other, just as some whites have this idea of exploring the other in different ways, whether it be through language or dance or dress or, hairstyle, whatever the case might be. That's this sort of aspect of exploring what it's like to be the other in some way without, fully committing. You see what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of what Second Life affords, and it's cool.
It does. It really does, yeah.
Is that how you then sort of researched that?
Exactly, because remember, this was the same time that I was developing the Virtual Harlem project at a higher end. So I began considering these kinds of things at the same time I was writing my dissertation and saw the connection immediately.
So, and then did you literally go to places and in different guises and found out how people treated you?
No, I didn't do that. I know some of my students did. I taught writing within Second Life, and these were the topics of some of the essays that students had to write about, when they began to explore. It just wasn't teaching a class within a virtual environment. It was having them experience that environment and then write about it. So, in many cases, eliminate, things like plagiarism because everybody's experience is different. So here's where you have some students exploring that very thing. I do know that, in having them explore these things, that also led them to explore other issues of weight, other issues of, maybe, someone who's a white female, blonde hair versus dark hair, those things that sometimes, even if they were a white female, they want to see, want to explore that minor aspect of the other, because it is still considered the other. The other doesn't always have to be racially sort of implied. I think it is important then, when you think about the contextualization of Harlem and what that meant with regards to even racism here in America. When you think about these sort of created environments that were in some cases for the explicit pleasure of some whites who were moneyed during the early part of the 1920s that came uptown to experience, clubs and cabarets in Harlem, because that's where one could explore that other side. So you have all these implications in just the Harlem environment that some people may then choose to explore the other in the quest of maybe experiencing some of those things in these environments.
This is such pioneering work that you have done so long ago, and people still are not even remotely at the level of exploring things like that.
No, people are. People really are. I mean, there's the educational community in Second Life is doing some amazing things. You can't discount, what folks are doing, with regards to exploring many of the things that I've also done, but that they're doing equally well, if not better.
In closing, I mean, you've been saying, I mean, we live in an exciting time. There is a lot of open doors, a lot of excitement technologically.
I think with things like the AR glasses that are coming out by multiple parties, even Samsung has jumped into the fray. Companies like Meta One, the Epson glasses that are coming out. I mean, so many, and this is just the beginning of that. And I think that eventually these different paths are going to they're on a collision course, and when all of that begins to converge, oh my gosh, it's going to be very, very exciting, and we're at the beginning of that. So as educators, I always tell my colleagues that, it doesn't matter almost what platform you're on. I think it's important that we learn how to exist within these worlds so that we aren't caught off guard, particularly as a field in Africana studies. We aren't caught off guard when the rest of the world eventually, experiences that convergence. And then, we as a field are finally jumping into that, like, someone who's just now discovering PowerPoint.
Exactly, but that's why I was calling you a pioneer, and because yes, you are in this community, but it's not. It has to be larger. It has to be embraced all around, and there's still. I just see so much sort of not understanding and this sort of fear to incorporate these technologies.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid we're going to lose ourselves in these worlds. A lot of people are afraid it's going to disconnect us from that which is most important and real people, real issues. Not that those can't be in some ways, expressed within these worlds, but there's of course a definite argument to say that that's not real. And so I think that there's some real issues that people are in some cases more concerned with, as opposed to pedagogy within virtual environments or whatever we're doing there.
I think people should be concerned about watching reality shows on television and getting hammered. That's the real danger. I'm sorry.
Well, there is that audience, definitely.
Unfortunately. Well, you know what, Brian, it's a pleasure. I'm going to go to my legacy platform, my old piano from the 40s, okay?
Legacy is not a bad thing.
I'm going to my legacy platform and play play In the Mood for Love or some standard, which is very old but still resonates.
All right. Well, it's very nice to have spoken with you, and I'm sure we'll run into one another at some point again.
Well, that was Brian Carter, and yes, I do hope we will run into each other again, maybe in avatar form on a holodeck when the time comes, the time we hopefully will still be able to experience, when I can turn my living room into a virtual world and travel back in time and jam with Fats Waller. I'm getting my chops ready right now after the taping is done.
I spent a lot of time in virtual Harlem when it was still in Second Life, and it was fantastic. It was a huge inspiration to me, and I really hope that they return. Even though even if they just return as a little skybox with a little setup. Where they can tell about the project and perhaps even share a bit of information about it.
That's right. And OpenSim, you talked about this that for your project specifically, while OpenSim might seem attractive from a price point, you don't have the foot traffic of people just looking up in the directory and then, hey, wait a minute, here's something, and then they just teleport in and experience it like that.
Yeah, it's not just about being able to pay the bills, which luckily 1920s Berlin can do, but it's also because I've got this thing. I want to reach people who perhaps are not at all interested in 1920s Germany and the Weimar Republic, who are just looking for something and they stumble into 1920s Berlin. And before they know it, they've learned something. If I've managed to squeeze some knowledge into their head, spreading education, whether they like it or not. To me, that is part of the fun, introducing this story to a whole new line of people from all over the world, some of whom have never been to Germany, don't even know about the Weimar Republic.
I really do hope that Brian maybe, checks it out again and checks out the stuff that has changed and improved in Second Life. And, as you're talking about this, I remember that, we used to... talk, I think that was your original idea. What if Linden Lab would provide these customizable viewers, these branded viewers? That means if you go in, the viewer, when you start it up, is completely branded after 1920s Berlin with screenshots, with individual locations. And that could be done for something like Virtual Harlem as well. That this is the piece of software that you basically download from virtualharlem.com or from the Facebook page. You download it, you install it, and boom, it on the surface it looks like that this virtual world is only about this one thing, and so you get a little scaffolding, you get a little help.
I also think that Linden Lab really, really has to work very, very hard at providing a standalone Second Life. Because that is the one thing that many educational groups tell me, that they say, yeah, of course, the high tier is important, but they also just want to have this exhibit or a meeting or a display, and they want to show it to their class without the risk of someone running around naked out of nowhere.
But standalone, it has been tried with the standalone version on a standalone server. Isn't that easy to do if you have tools where you restrict A, access, and B, maybe disable teleports outside of that experience, perhaps?
Yeah, you can sort of simulate that situation in Second Life by closing teleporting in and out. I know you can close the sim out to the public, which is not easy because then you have to add everyone you want to invite to the list that they can come in. So that's a bit of a hassle, but it's possible. But as far as I know, you can't teleport. You can't avoid people, stop people from teleporting out, and I think that is important for educational sims. But on the other hand, there are also many other options to try and make a sim work. And virtual Harlem and 1920s Berlin, we have a lot in common, not only the era, but also the theme. We both want to tell about a cultural golden age, a time of freedom, but also oppression and things like that. We have a lot in common. So I really hope they do come back and perhaps we'll see if we can do a few things together.
All right, so we gotta move on. We have tons of links, contextual links for this interview. We're nearing the end of the show. What tips, recommendations do you have for the weekend, Joe? Anything?
Well, of course, yesterday was September 11th, and I went to see a stair climb tribute to the fallen firefighters. It's in Second Life, and it's a monument to those brave guys who risked so much and gave their lives trying to save people. And we'll put the link on the website. You can go there and you can actually carry all the fire equipment and go up all the stairs of the old World Trade Center. The images come to you, the pictures that we've all seen. You imagine, you remember them, and you also realize that when you get a little bit sick and tired of all these stairs, you realize that you're not even halfway.
I did a machinima in 2007 about Interdependence Day in Second Life. It's one of my early machinimas. We'll link to it. Also, Mona Eberhard, I need to put this in. She reminded me earlier 9/11 is also a day that folks from Chile probably remember more vividly than the U.S. 9/11, because in 1973, a democratically elected, albeit socialist government in Chile under President Salvador Allende was overthrown violently and ushered in, of course, the terrible regime of Pinochet. And you might want to look this up because the US of A had some involvement. All right, that's all the real-life news we have time for today. I want to bring your attention to the 10th anniversary of the Confederation of Democratic Simulators this weekend. Now, the Confederation of Democratic Simulators runs a bunch of sims. They run Neufreistadt, they run Colonia Nova, and a bunch of newer ones. Al-Andalus as well. I made my first machinima about virtual democracy way back in early 2007. This was a community that welcomed me as a noob. I lived in Colonia Nova. I had a little house there that I accidentally deleted once too. But their 10-year anniversary in Second Life reminds me again how important, and we all know that, is the community is what makes you stick around. If you have that luck of finding these people that help you out, you will stick around and you're basically in for life.
We've talked about that before. Getting new people to find a place they like or people they like, that is the most important thing about Second Life. That's the only way to keep people in.
Now, Ziki Questi, we employed giving us the sim visit of the week because, we don't get out much. I mean, you less than I. In terms of places to go to, must visits, Ziki Questi is recommending France Portnahawk. She writes, in the last incarnation, this sim featured icebergs and the Titanic, but now the place has been redesigned by Laika Arado. It's a stunningly beautiful place featuring gardens wrapped around a central lake, lush with brilliant color. It's one of the most photogenic locations Ziki has seen in Second Life. We'll link to her blog post. Now, as I promised at the top of the hour, we go out today with music and not more blah, blah, blah. Oble. Oble is a musician from rural southwestern Colorado where he raises chickens and reportedly generates his own electricity on a bicycle so he can log on to SL. No, that's not true.
Oh, I was just going to...
You bought it!
Well, here in my country, we created energy like that for a while when some Germans, I think, decided to invade us. Remember that little thing?
No, I wasn't alive back then.
Don't mention the war.
Anyway, Oble is a super talented dude. He plays in Second Life about twice a week. He plays drums, piano, guitar. He loops his stuff. He sings. And his current album is called Wow Bob Wow. And as I said at the top of the hour, the mastering and distribution was all funded with money he makes in Second Life. The tune that we're playing is called Moonrise, featuring Engramma. Engramma is a band from Barcelona. I profiled them in episode 5 of the video series. Here is their song Moonrise. Enjoy. See you next week. Goodbye. Goodbye, Joe.
Auf Wiedersehen.
She got me
Drax Files Radio Hour with Joe Yardley is a weekly production of Basic Drax Entertainment. The show supported by Leap Motion, SL Go By On Live, Stitcher, Paradise Lost in Second Life, Bot Girls Identity Circus, Carvel Design, Vika Creations, Humanoid Animations, Escapades, Botanical, Death Row Designs, Nantra, Angel Red Couture, Fallen Gods Incorporated, Blue Moon Enterprises, What's Next, Avacon, and Landscapes Unlimited. Contact the show via Skype, DraxFiles, Avatar DraxFiles, or email radio@draxfiles.com.